Hello, everyone. Good morning, and welcome to this very special edition of Last Week with India AI. In fact, I think we're doing a slightly different spin this week for you and bringing you the latest updates, the daily, happenings at the Race 2020, which is the mega event of India's AI landscape today. Pretty much the who's who of the AI ecosystem is participating. We are expecting some great numbers to be able to participate and partake in one of what is being reckoned and heralded as India's biggest AI event, essentially. So, a very exciting week ahead. We've just finished our inaugural session, late last evening, and I think the entire team has been working overtime to try and post as many updates and bring it to you live and as it happens. So, Jibu, how's it going? And good morning.
Good morning, Sundaja. It was an incredible evening. So we had the Race 2020 inauguration by the Prime Minister. Some amazing speech by Dr. Raj Reddy. You got Arvind Krishna, Ravi Shankar Prasad, Mukesh Ambani, Amitabh Kant, all those people.
Yeah.
Ajay Sani. So I think this is the fact is race as mentioned by many of the people. The race 2020 scale is humongous in many way, right? It has over right now over 60,000 registration, right? Around 130, 140 country, and that's one side of it, right? And the number of speakers you have around I don't know, I think around 250 speakers are also there, right? So it's amazing the scale in which this event is happening. I can't recollect a time when I was in a virtual event which was of this scale. And
Yeah.
look at the sessions, right? You got around 40-45 sessions also happening, and we will try our best covering as much as of it as possible. So that's the one thing, and I really like what the way the Prime Minister put forward the whole idea, right? I mean, he was mentioning that AI is like the best testimony for how far our human intellect has reached.
Yeah.
And most of his conversation has been around the point of the need to have human plus AI as a workforce, right? We often has this notion that AI is going to replace us, but if you remember what Prime Minister was speaking yesterday, the point he mentioned was you need the emotions and intuitions and empathy of a human, and the raw computing power of an AI to ensure that the many of the challenges are solved. And I have a quick announcement that we have few guests joined on our call. Some of the people who are working on this event with India AI. Hi, Soumitra Dasgupta, who is the senior communications manager at NASCOM, Nibedita Saha, who is a researcher, and Samiksha Mehra, who is one of the newest members of our team. Hi to all, and let's start with Soumitra. What do you think? What was your thought on the race 2020?
Yeah, yeah. So I was really impressed by the proceedings yesterday, and especially the gentleman, Dr. Reddy, when he spoke towards the end. I think that was the best takeaway for the day. And he came up with some incredible piece of statistics and learning. I mean, I didn't know that the global economy was worth $90 trillion. We knew that the I knew that the U.S. economy is about 18 and Chinese is about 12 or 13, and we are about 3. But I never knew that the world. So that was a big learning from me, and he sort of wove a dream around what AI can do for those who are underprivileged, especially those who aren't educated or who don't know English, and the entire thing of translation. I mean, that can really bridge the divide. Prime Minister, being his usual self, was always has always been very inspirational, and he was also his dire warning towards the end that AI can be used by non-state actors, and we should be wary of that. I think that that is something we need to pay heed to, because while on one side there are tremendous benefits that AI can have, and we will be seeing this over the course of the next 4 days. But the ill effects of AI can be equally devastating in my in his view, and views of all of us. Ravi Shankar Prasad, the minister, had also a great piece of statistics to share, the kind of forays we have made into the digital space in the last few years, and especially the fact that something like 170 odd billion dollars have been transferred in 370 million accounts. That speaks volumes of the kind of trust this has been able to build. And of course, he rattled off other piece of statistics and in the area of healthcare and financial inclusivity, and 10.6 million farmers using the enam platform and all of that. So that was riveting stuff. Then we
Uh,
had,
I
yeah,
think
sorry.
one of the key points also was mentioned was how much India's digital platforms, right? I think the Aadhaar and the UPI. I mean, UPI has
Yeah,
become this sophisticated and very huge. I mean, I regularly use UPI, right? It's one of the lifesavers, to be honest.
yeah.
Nivedita, are you on? What is your take from the inaugural day?
Yeah, it was really very lots of things, lots of information from Prime Minister, from Dr. Reddy as well. So it was good. I mean, it was totally new to me in the sense, of course, whatever they said, it was all meaningful. But then it all depends how we are one part is being visionary, the other part is actually implementing it. So I think the most important part is how to implement it. How can India, utilize its talent, the AI, and then we can move forward with it.
Samisha, so what were your takes from the opening day?
Hi. Well, I think that the inaugural session was amazing. All of them, they set the ground really well for what we can expect in the over the next 5 days. But I do think that some of them gave some very telling statistics as well. For example, Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad, he spoke about how the digital transformation has actually been helping India during the pandemic, and he told us how the government was able to enable direct cash transfers and exclude middlemen and hence prevent leakages. So things like that. Also, I think Mr. Ambani was also hailed by a few of the speakers for the digital transformation that he's enabled. So I think it was really the collaboration between government, academia, and the industry that we got to see during the inauguration, and what we can expect to see over the next 4 days as the event unfolds as well.
I think Sindhuja had a chance to, go deeper into the conversations, the statements made by Arvind Krishna and Mukesh Ambani yesterday, isn't it, Sindhuja?
Yeah, that's right. So it kind of started off on a bit of an impromptu. I wasn't expecting them to start the keynote, so I was kind of scrambling for my pen and paper. But what was, I mean, before I get into what Dr. Arvind Krishna and, of course, Mr. Mukesh Ambani had to say, I just wanted to take a moment to note the magnanimity of the panel and the extent of the speakers that we had. And I think that is something that's very reflective of the kind of sessions that we can expect over the next 4 days. I think, we had a due representation from academia in the form of Professor Raj Reddy, a Turing Award winner nonetheless. Of course, we had very, very balanced representation from the government. We had NITI Aayog, which is our think tank, when it comes to all things AI and everything futuristic when it comes to, what India is really doing. We had METI duly represented by Ajay Sani, as well as, of course, the Union Minister Ravi Shankar Prasad, and of course, nonetheless, the Prime Minister himself, who was so on point, who was so comprehensive in his keynote. I think he spoke about the humane aspects of AI. I also particularly like that he mentioned that there are the bad players, the bad boys, and the anti the antithesis of what AI really should be. And it's good that he spoke about that, because it's not always all hunky dory. And I think it's important to take note of these anti-state players as well, and work towards trying to build systems which are more responsible. And of course, none of these sessions are really complete without industry representation. And I think that's where having a Reliance as well as an IBM, I think, is also very interesting for more than one reason. Of course, IBM needs no introduction, and definitely Dr. Krishna is someone who has really charted his own path in terms of success when it comes to establishing a certain kind of leadership in IBM. He took over in April 2020, literally smack in the middle of a pandemic, and he's been credited with one of the biggest acquisitions that IBM has led, which is of Red Hat. And to be able to steer a company in that direction purely with his expertise when it comes to quantum computing, when it comes to hybrid cloud, and when it comes to pure play AI strengths, is something that is very telling of the future of a company like IBM in terms of the kind of direction it's going in. And of course, Reliance, I think Amitabh Kant, CEO of NITI Aayog, said it very well. What started out as a petrochemical major and then slowly went into the field of electricity is today one of the biggest players when it comes to data with Reliance Jio, and with dispensing digital platforms. And having Mukesh Ambani there, I think, was also sort of a harbinger of that new age in which India is really headed, when it comes to enterprises and when it comes to companies and conglomerates of that size, in terms of the way they can pivot with respect to keeping digital as a priority. So I think the panel itself was very reflective. I think this is what is going to be the flavor of the sessions that we can expect over the next few days, for one. And specifically, I think I particularly liked, I was quite happy that Dr. Krishna mentioned that there's going to be an AI Center of Excellence that IBM is going to open with the government e-marketplace. The reason this is so important as a development is because this is, again, that very point of the synergy between industry and government, which is going to be so imperative to really make AI this big, reality that we're all looking at it as of right now. I mean, it is a pipe dream. It's great to have all these numbers. It's great to have lofty dreams, but it's not going to happen without collaboration. And that is also something that Dr. Krishna specifically emphatically spoke about, that the future of AI will depend on data, trust, and skills. And of course, Mr. Ambani needs no introduction, but I think his speech was so on point when it came to just mentioning the entire, it felt like the cavalry is ready. I think his speech was more motivational, and I think that was something that we all needed to hear. He rattled off some very, very interesting data points about the fiber network that is established and that's connecting pretty much 99% of our country. We're number one in mobile consumption, up from rank number 155. That's a phenomenal jump in terms of the usage that India has really sort of been able to show in the last 6 years, since Digital India has become a front and central mandate for the government as well as state governments to follow. And of course, he also specifically also touched upon how AI can be an epoch-changing piece of technology when it comes to healthcare, education, agriculture, and so many other grassroots level sectors and more. So I think for me it was a very it was a great curtain raiser. I think it set the expectation really well. So if anyone who attended that inaugural note yesterday would get a very clear idea of what to expect over the next 4 days.
I think one thing I want to add to is the AI falling into the hands of the wrong people with something Prime Minister want. It's something we have been, in many of the podcasts before, me and Sindhuja has conversed about. It's about being responsible, and I think there have been so many. One of the areas also we looked into, right? We had a startup survey, we had other surveys, and do we need a global legal framework, right? How we use the Nuclear Proliferation Treaty, Non-Proliferation Treaty to ban the transfer of nuclear technology. And I think we will soon reach at a point where we need something like that with AI also. What if, don't forget, don't just limited to non-state actors. What about rogue nations, right? What about a regime like Assad in Syria, or Kim Jong-un, Kim's regime in North Korea, or who get access to a very fancy I don't know surveillance system or things like that. So these things are quite possible, and the Prime Minister has warned about that happening. Not all the countries are same, right? Not all the countries are built on top of democratic values, but there are, if you especially go into the continent of Africa, you see every sort of the nations, right? You got military dictatorship, you got the warlords ruling certain parts. So those things are there. So it's quite interesting, and I think today we will be covering so many things. I think Soumitra will be the first to start covering today. I think he has a session at 10:30. We are at this is 10:12 actually. What are you looking forward today?
So I missed out something which I wanted to add.
Yes.
I mean, I've been with NASSCOM for quite some time, but for the first time in my life, I'm actually attending a conference, albeit a virtual one with 60,000 plus participants and representative of 139 odd countries. So, which means that all the information that we're going to gather between all of us and all is going to be disseminated to 140 odd countries, 39, 40 odd countries, which is like 66 or 70% of the world, which is huge, which is massive. And and your second question, what I'm looking at is this this whole NPCI is a very powerful platform, and it's built some really powerful tools. So it would be interesting to see how. So the first session is on financial inclusivity. I mean, how AI is driving financial inclusivity, which is at 10:30. So I hope to see that. And there's a whole range of speakers. I think there are some 8 or 10 odd speakers, some global ones, international ones, and Indian speakers as well. So it'll be great to see what is the Indian perspective about financial inclusivity, and what is for us financial inclusivity, and is there a difference from some of the learnings from the developed world? The developed nations, they may look at financial inclusivity in a completely different manner, because for them that last mile challenge is not as big a deal, perhaps, arguably, as it is for us. So how do you solve that last mile connectivity? I think that is something which I'll be very interestingly looking forward to at 10:30.
How do you say, very strong panels on the financial inclusivity panel, including Mohandas Pai, who has been one of the key pioneers in India's IT sector. Nivedita, what is your take? What are you looking forward for the day?
So since my session is all about role of regulations, so everybody will have their stand on what do you mean by regulations, how they interpret regulations, how the different countries look at interpretations. So I'm willing to learn more. So I have my own set of understanding regarding regulations. So want to learn more as to how they define regulations and how they want to put it to use in the Indian context.
That's an interesting topic. That we just spoke about the need to make sure AI don't fall into technologies won't fall into the wrong hand. How do we build regulations around it? Of course, Nivedita, you will be understanding this better than me. There is always the side saying that let market dictate things rather than regulatory framework. What is your personal thought when it comes to that?
Sorry, I lost the last.
So you generally says, right, you don't need regulatory framework like what certain organizations says in US, right? But you let the market will kind of figure it out itself. Are you someone who believes in that kind of system, or do you need to have some framework?
No, I think there should be some amount of framework, because if you leave it to the market, I don't think the Indian market is so mature enough that you leave it and then it can take a shape on its own. So definitely you need to lay down the framework, the structure, and then depending on that we can always move forward, whether we leave it to the market or then again we step in and make some adjustments that that decision can be taken later on. But definitely we need some regulations right now.
Sadhuja, what about you? What is your role today?
Today I think I'm most excited about the panel that I'm going to cover, which is at 12:30. It's on the role of inclusion, and I think that's such a huge theme when it comes to Race 2020. And I'm just looking at the lineup of speakers that we have, and it's a very, very illustrious lineup of speakers, and all women panel. So
yes.
More power to our tribe, and I hope our tribe grows. So there's the lineup of speakers speakers just off the, just to give the listeners some idea in terms of who we can expect. It's we've got speakers like Ms. Anita Bhatia, the Assistant Secretary General for Resource Management, Sustainability, Partnerships, and the Deputy Executive Director for UN Women. There's Jenny Lay Fleury, who's the Chief Accessibility Officer at Microsoft. And for those who are interested, you should look her up because she's got an incredibly uplifting personal story of her own, which makes her such a great fit for this panel. Then there's Nishra Satyam, who's the Deputy Country Representative for Women, for UN Women in India. There's Shakuntala Gamlin, the Secretary of the Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities from the Government of India. Then there's Susie Hargreaves, who's the CEO of the Internet Watch Foundation, and she's from the UK. There's Elena Sinel, who's the founder of Teens in AI and ACON Aspirations. So yeah, this is basically just some of the speakers that that is going to be a part of the inclusion panel that's happening at 12:30. So for all those who have registered for RAISE, I would strongly recommend that you specifically sign up for this session and don't miss out on these insights, because these are the women and these are the cross section of people that are going to sort of shape the future of what AI could be in India.
I think I will be the one who will be continuing what that happened yesterday. I'm on the panel that focuses more on what Raj Reddy was saying yesterday, how you can use speech recognition and the voice tools to sort of bridge the language gap, right, between different language speaking India. I mean, that's another panel that's quite interesting, bridging communication and linguistic barriers with voice enabled AI. You got Raj Reddy, you got Pushpak Bhattacharya, the director of IIT Patna, who is a very illustrious, very renowned AI researcher from India. Also, you have Professor C.V. Jawahar, from IIIT Hyderabad. I mean, if you guys are followers of our regular podcast, we often mention IIIT Hyderabad, which has done some incredible job. And this is a lot, most of academically centered panel, but with some industry. You got Vivek Pani of Rewire Language Technologies. You got Kalka Bali from Microsoft Research. So overall, and you got, of course, you got Midesh Kapra from IIT Madras. So it's a very balanced session, but then again, I'm pretty much sure we are all in there to hear what Professor Raj Reddy has to keep saying. So that's the thing about that panel. And I think Samiksha, you have a panel on education, if I am correct. You will be covering, right?
That's correct. So my session, the one that I'm covering, is scheduled for 5. It's called Education and Awareness for Responsible AI. So, the education is definitely the part of AI that I'm most interested in. And we have a great panel, which is the keynote speakers. We have 2 keynote speakers, Mrs. Roshni Nadar and Mr. Rahul Sharma. Ms. Nadar, of course, she's made headlines earlier this year for being the first woman to be leading, spearheading an IT conglomerate in India. So that would be interesting. And again, we have very balanced representation from the government as well. We have Mr. Rakesh Ranjan, who's the Additional Secretary, Ministry of Education, and Mr. Jaideep Mishra, the Joint Secretary for MeitY. And we have some really interesting speakers on the panel as well, being moderated by Ms. Urvashi Aneja, who's the moderator from Tandem Research. So I think that would be some really interesting insights to look forward to in this session. And I'd like to add to what you said about the language, the panel on linguistics. I think Mr. Raj Reddy did speak yesterday a little bit about that in his lecture later. And he had some really telling statistics when he said he's spoken to representatives from Amazon and Apple, and they really had very little incentive to look into Indian languages, which comes across as surprising given the share of the population and the market that we offer. So I think
I think one thing Raj Reddy told yesterday, I mean, I have it here in my notes, right, is how it's not a difficult challenge, right? He was mentioning if you have 100,000, element of 100,000 hours of speech on a particular language, and you have 100 million text on that same language, it won't be a difficult challenge. And I don't think that's whether I mean, even in our panel, I mean, oh god, this is like as multilingual as my mother tongue is Malayalam.
Yeah.
Sindhuja, do you say Kannada or Tamil, which is your mother tongue? Yeah, you got
Tamil technically,
Kannada
but
and
since I've
Tamil
lived here all my
represent.
life, Kannada is also as
Sora, do you say Bengali is your mother tongue?
No,
Because
no.
you're living in Delhi so long.
Haryanvi is my mother tongue
Okay. So your
because I
mother
live
tongue
in
is.
Gurgaon. I
But
speak
seriously.
I speak Bengali with a Haryanvi accent, or I try to.
Okay, we are counting you as the Bengali in the group. So, what about you, Samiksha? How good is your Punjabi?
Punjabi, yes, Punjabi also.
Yeah, so Samiksha is of course right from Amritsar, so it's obviously, and Nivedita, you are also from Gurgaon in Gurgaon,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
remember.
same like Soumitra, but my case is little just the reverse. I speak Haryanvi with a Bengali accent.
I think that is the correct representation of most of us. When I
yeah.
speak Punjabi, I think my Punjabi is a mix of Hindi, Urdu, Punjabi, and English. I mean, how often do we actually speak a language in its in entirety, purity?
Yeah,
That,
absolutely.
that's
My English is like I was a few days back. I think yesterday, one of our colleagues, Anjali Patak, who is a person who works, the people who don't come to the podcast, Anjali and
yes.
Asna and Anjali, and they make sure everything is running fine and correct. And a lot of kudos to them for keeping the registration platform up, the agendas up, and all the work that done by people from METI, Brahmanand, Abhishek Singh from Abhishek Singh and his team, including Brahmanand Barnali and Gaurav and everyone else. So yeah, it's a thing, right? We was talking about accents, and I was like, he was mentioning that there was this person with a very good accent. Then I started, trying to have a fake accent, try to say it's not a difficult thing to have accent. Then I said, like, see, there's no point, right? Our identity comes from our own version of English, right?
Right.
I like to mollify everything, and there's a like people just identify me by so there is this thing whenever I'm in Delhi, I'm in a call or something, and people just assume I'm a Malayali. And I'm like, I ask, is it because of my name or is it my accent? So most cases it's my accent that gives away. So we all speak. So this is like a very linguistically rich and diverse group.
Definitely.
I think among us five people, we can handle around what 10 languages at least.
Easy choice.
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this is where, but see, we are all here. We are all connected by English, right? But now imagine, because that's because we had the privilege, right, to have our parents were able to afford or offer us good education. We were able to do that, but that's not the case with a significant number of Indians, right? And I think that's where what Raj Reddy was comes to more relevance, right? Things like speech recognition technology, speech translation, and I think we are not far away from that. We have seen many of these tools working between English and Mandarin very frequently in Microsoft's and Google's demos, right? Between French and German, all these things work well. But yeah, I think Indic language, our vernacular natural languaging process is going to be huge. We need to bring out all these languages so that next time when I'm in Bangalore, somebody calls me, swears at me in Kannada, I want to understand what he's saying at me. So yeah, anyway, guys, so great to have you all here. Exciting day to look forward. And so much to come for the next day. Yeah, that's us from us today, isn't it, Sindhujam?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Very
Wish you all the
excited. I
best.
don't think we
Yes,
should
yes,
reach
wishing you all the best.
Soumitra back anymore. I think he's like just 4 minutes away from his session. So thank you all
Yes.
for joining in, and we'll be
Yeah.
back again tomorrow at the same time with all the updates again for the rest of Race 2020. Until then, stay
Absolutely.
safe and do attend all of the sessions.
Yes.
Yeah, bye.
See you. See you guys. Bye.
See you guys. Bye.
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 Yeah, see you.